Well, we finally made it to Rule 12. Very excited that you guys have followed through on the journey. If you're only just joining, then I hope you enjoy Rule 12. It's a very interesting one, mainly because of the more personal details of Jordan Peterson's life that he reveals and is very vulnerable about, let's say. We're not just reading Rule 12, so I'm going to keep this preamble short because we actually have quite a lot to read. There's also a bit of an afterword that Jordan Peterson calls a coda, which matches the musical theme of the book in that he calls the foreword of the book the prelude. So we're also going to be reading that coda, and finally there's a page dedicated to acknowledgements that we're also going to read. The coda is talking about a pen of light, which is somewhat metaphorical and somewhat literal, what you can write with a pen of light and why you would want to have it in the first place. I was quite tempted by this idea to translate pen of light into Japanese just because it sounds so anime and so Final Fantasy. And I knew from Final Fantasy that warrior of light means hikari no kishi, and hikari no means of light, right? So I knew how to say of light. I was confused about how to say pen, however. So on my second monitor, I actually opened Google Translate and searched up the Japanese translation for pen. And here's how you pronounce it. It's quite difficult. I might have to say this a few times. You pronounce it pen. I know, shocking. Pen. Very difficult. And I'm actually very proud that my Japanese ability has gotten to the point where I can translate from English into Japanese the word pen. And let me repeat it once more time for those of you who are very curious about the Japanese pronunciation. It's pen. Which means that a pen of light is actually hikari no pen. And I really felt like I needed to give this shout out as a member of Hydra myself, Hail Hydra, to my Axis brothers and sisters over in the Far East. Shout out to their attack on Pearl Harbor just a couple of decades ago. All right, that's enough. That's enough being an idiot. Like I said, we've got a lot to read, so let's jump straight into it. For the last time, praise be. Well, not for the last time. Red Skull will always be praised in our hearts. But for the last time that I will be recording it, praise be our supreme leader, Red Skull. Rule 12. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. Hail Hydra. Part 1. Dogs are okay, too. I'm going to start this chapter by stating directly that I own a dog, an American Eskimo, one of the many variants of the basic Spitz type. Hail Hydra. They were known as German Spitzes until the First World War made it verboten, appropriately, to admit that anything good could come from Germany. Hail Hydra. Well, I know at least one good thing that came from Germany. Hail Hydra! American Eskimos are among the most beautiful of dogs, with a pointed, classic wolf face, upright ears, a long, thick coat, and a curly tail. Hail Hydra, they are also very intelligent. Hail Hydra. Our dog, whose name is Sikko, which means ice in an Inuit language, according to my daughter, who named him, learns tricks very rapidly, and can do so even now that he's old. Hail Hydra. I taught him a new stunt recently when he turned 13. Hail Hydra. He already knew how to shake a paw and to balance a treat on his nose. Hail Hydra. I taught him to do both at the same time. Wow. Hail Hydra. However, it's not at all clear he enjoys it. Hail Hydra. We bought Sikko for my daughter, Michaela, when she was about 10 years old. Hail Hydra. He was an unbearably cute pup. Hail Hydra. Small nose and ears, rounded face, big eyes, awkward movements. These features automatically elicit caretaking behavior from humans, male and female alike. Hail Hydra. This was certainly the case with Michaela, who was also occupied with the care of bearded dragons, geckos, ball pythons, chameleons, iguanas, and a 20-pound, 32-inch long Flemish giant rabbit named George, who nibbled on everything in the house and frequently escaped, to the great consternation of those who then spied his improbably large form in their tiny mid-city gardens. Hail Hydra. God bless Flemish giant rabbits. You know, those of you who've seen my channel a lot know that I'm a big fan of rabbits. I'd have one if I could, but honestly, I'm really absent-minded about taking care of people, let alone high-maintenance animals like rabbits, so I'd probably cause them harm. I'm debating it. Flemish giants, though, are absolutely huge, and you can find videos of them on YouTube being massive. being absolutely just unbelievably massive. Most of the rabbits you see online are usually very small Holland lops or Netherland dwarfs, and these are super cutie, adorable, woody rabbits. Which I don't really like. I don't really like cute stuff. If I had a rabbit, then I'd want one that looks almost like a hare. I think hares look like demon spawn. Same with kangaroos. But I think that makes them more attractive as animals. I'm not really sure why. I just think that's the case. So, sue me. I don't know. Hail Hydra. She had all these animals because she was allergic to the more typical pets. Excepting Sicko, who had the additional advantage of being hypoallergenic. Hail Hydra. That's pretty cool. Sicko garnered 50 nicknames, we counted, which varied broadly in their emotional tone, and reflected both the affection in which he was held and our occasional frustration with his beastly habits. Hail Hydra. Scumdog was probably my favorite, but I also held Wrathhound, Furball, and Suckdog in rather high esteem. Hail Hydra. The kids used Sneak and Squeak, sometimes with an appended O, so Sneeko and Squeako, most frequently, but accompanied it with Snooky, Ugdog, and Snorfalopagus, horrible though it is to admit. Hail Hydra. Snorbs is Michaela's current moniker of choice. Hail Hydra. Reminder, the dog is called Sicko. I don't know how she derived Snorbs from Sicko, but alright. She uses it to greet him after a prolonged absence. Hail Hydra, for full effect, it must be uttered in a high-pitched and surprised voice. Hail Hydra. Sicko also happens to have his own Instagram hashtag #judgmentalsicko. Hail Hydra. That's SIKKO, by the way, for those of you who are looking for that Instagram hashtag. Hail Hydra. I am describing my dog instead of writing directly about cats, because I don't wish to run afoul of a phenomenon known as minimal group identification, discovered by the social psychologist Henry Teifel. That's spelled Tajfel. I'm assuming he's Dutch or something, so that J isn't pronounced the way it should be. Hail Hydra. Teifel brought his research subjects into his lab and sat them down in front of a screen onto which he flashed a number of dots. Hail Hydra. The subjects were asked to estimate their quantity. Hail Hydra. Then he categorized his subjects as overestimators versus underestimators, as well as accurate versus inaccurate, and put them into groups corresponding to their performance. Hail Hydra. Then he asked them to divide money among the members of all the groups. Hail Hydra. Teifel found that his subjects displayed a marked preference for their own group members, rejecting an egalitarian distribution strategy and disproportionately rewarding those with whom they now identified. Hail Hydra. Other researchers have assigned people to different groups using ever more arbitrary strategies, such as flipping a coin. Hail Hydra. It didn't matter, even when the subjects were informed of the way the groups were composed. Hail Hydra. People still favored the co-members of their personal group. Hail Hydra. Teifel's studies demonstrated two things. First, that people are social. Second, that people are antisocial. Hail Hydra. People are social because they like the members of their own group. Hail Hydra. People are antisocial because they don't like the members of other groups. Hail Hydra. Exactly why this is so has been the subject of continual debate. Hail Hydra. I think it might be a solution to a complex problem of optimization. Hail Hydra. Such problems arise, for example, when two or more factors are important, but none can be maximized without diminishing the others. Hail Hydra. A problem of this sort emerges, for example, because of the antipathy between cooperation and competition, both of which are socially and psychologically desirable. Hail Hydra. Cooperation is for safety, security, and companionship. Hail Hydra. Competition is for personal growth and status. Hail Hydra. However, if a given group is too small, it has no power or prestige and cannot fend off other groups. Hail Hydra. In consequence, being one of its members is not that useful. Hail Hydra. If the group is too large, however, the probability of climbing near or to the top declines. Hail Hydra. So it becomes too hard to get ahead. Hail Hydra. Perhaps people identify with groups at the flip of a coin because they deeply want to organize themselves protect themselves, and still have some reasonable probability of climbing the dominance hierarchy. Hail Hydra, then they favor their own group because favoring it helps it thrive, and climbing something that is not thriving is not a useful strategy. Hail Hydra, in any case, it is because of Teufel's minimal conditions discovery that I began this cat-related chapter with a description of my dog, Hail Hydra. Otherwise, the mere mention of a cat in the title would be enough to turn many dog people against me. Just because I didn't include canines in the group of entities that ought to be petted, Hail Hydra, well, since I also like dogs, there is no reason for me to suffer such a fate, Hail Hydra. So, if you like to pet dogs when you meet them on the street, don't feel obliged to hate me, Hail Hydra. Rest assured instead that this is also an activity of which I approve, Hail Hydra. I would also like to apologize to all the cat people who now feel slighted because they were hoping for a cat story, but had to read all this dog-related material. Hail Hydra. Perhaps they might be satisfied by some assurance that cats do illustrate the points I want to make better, and that I will eventually discuss them. Hail Hydra. First, however, to other things. Hail Hydra. You know, for a totalitarian neo-Nazi, Jordan Peterson is really apologetic about the fact that he's talking about dogs and not cats. This is great. I love this. Part 2. Suffering and the limitations of being. The idea that life is suffering is a tenet in one form or another of every major religious doctrine, as we have already mentioned, Hail Hydra, in another chapter. Hail Hydra, Buddhists state it directly. Hail Hydra, Christians illustrate it with the cross. Hail Hydra, Jews commemorate the suffering endured over centuries. Hail Hydra. Such reasoning universally characterizes the great creeds, because human beings are intrinsically fragile. Hail Hydra. We can be damaged, even broken, emotionally and physically, and we are all subject to the depredations of aging and loss. Hail Hydra. This is a dismal set of facts, and it is reasonable to wonder how we can expect to thrive and be happy, or even want to exist sometimes, under such conditions. Hail Hydra. I was speaking recently with a client whose husband had been engaging in a successful battle with cancer for an agonizing period of 5 years. Hail Hydra, they had both held up remarkably and courageously over this period. Hail Hydra, however, he fell prey to the tendency of that dread condition to metastasize, and, in consequence, had been given very little time to live. Hail Hydra, it is perhaps hardest to hear terrible news like this when you are still in the fragile, post-recovery state that occurs after dealing successfully with previous bad news. Hail Hydra, tragedy at such a time seems particularly unfair. Hail Hydra, it is the sort of thing that can make you distrust even hope itself. Hail Hydra, it's frequently sufficient to cause genuine trauma. Hail Hydra. My client and I discussed a number of issues, some philosophical and abstract, and some more concrete. Hail Hydra. I shared with her some of the thoughts that I had developed about the whys and wherefores of human vulnerability. Hail Hydra. When my son, Julian, was about 3 years old, he was particularly cute. Hail Hydra. I guess he's not anymore. He's 20 years older than that now, but still quite cute. Never mind. A compliment I'm sure he'll particularly enjoy reading. Yes. Hail Hydra. Because of him, I thought a lot about the fragility of small children. Hail Hydra. A 3-year-old is easily damaged. Hail Hydra. Dogs can bite him. Hail Hydra. Cars. I was going to say cats can hit him. Cars can hit him. Hail Hydra. Mean kids can push him over. Hail Hydra. He can get sick and sometimes did. Hail Hydra. Julian was prone to high fevers and the delirium they sometimes produce. Hail Hydra. Sometimes I had to take him to the shower with me and cool him off when he was hallucinating or even fighting with me in his feverish state. Hail Hydra. There are few things that make it harder to accept the fundamental limitations of human existence than a sick child. Hail Hydra. Julian, by the way, has a Spotify. That is, he makes music, and it's on Spotify. You can find it on Spotify. If you search Julian Peterson, you can find his EP. Maybe he has 2 EPs. I actually forget, but he has music on Spotify, so you can go look that up if you're curious. And no, I'm not being paid by Jordan Peterson or by Julian Peterson to support his music. I just thought it was something interesting that needed to be said. Michaela, a year and a few months older than Julian, also had her problems. Hail Hydra. When she was 2, I would lift her up on my shoulders and carry her around. Hail Hydra. Kids enjoy that. Hail Hydra. Afterwards, however, when I put her feet back on the ground, she would sit down and cry. Hail Hydra. So I stopped doing it. Hail Hydra. And that seemed to be the end of the problem, with a seemingly minor exception. Hail Hydra. My wife, Tammy, told me that something was wrong with Michaela's gait. Hail Hydra. G-A-I-T. Hail Hydra. I couldn't see it. Hail Hydra. Tammy thought it might be related to her reaction to being carried on my shoulders. Hail Hydra. Michaela was a sunny child and very easy to get along with. Hail Hydra. One day when she was about 14 months old, I took her along with Tammy and her grandparents to Cape Cod when we lived in Boston. Hail Hydra. When we got there, Tammy and her mom and dad walked ahead and left me with Michaela in the car. Hail Hydra. We were in the front seat. Hail Hydra. She was lying there in the sun babbling away. Hail Hydra. I leaned over to hear what she was saying. Hail Hydra. Happy, 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 happy. Hail Hydra. That's what she was like. Hail Hydra. When she turned 6, however, she started to get mopey. Hail Hydra. It was hard to get her out of bed in the morning. Hail Hydra. She put on her clothes very slowly. Hail Hydra. When we walked somewhere, she lagged behind. Hail Hydra. She complained that her feet hurt and that her shoes didn't fit. Hail Hydra. We bought her 10 different pairs, but it didn't help. Hail Hydra. She went to school and held her head up, held her head up and behaved properly. Hail Hydra. But when she came home and saw her mom, she would break into tears. Hail Hydra. We had recently moved from Boston to Toronto and attributed these changes to the stress of the move. Hail Hydra. But it didn't get better. Hail Hydra. Michaela began to walk up and down stairs 1 step at a time. Hail Hydra. She began to move like someone much older. Hail Hydra. She complained if you held her hand. Hail Hydra. One time much later, she asked me, Dad, when you played this little piggy with me when I was little, was it supposed to hurt? Hail Hydra. The things you learn too late. Hail Hydra. A physician at our local medical clinic told us, sometimes children have growing pains. Hail Hydra. They're normal. Hail Hydra. But you could think about taking her to see a physiotherapist. Hail Hydra. So we did. Hail Hydra. The physiotherapist tried to rotate Michaela's heel. Hail Hydra. It didn't move. Hail Hydra. That was not good. Hail Hydra. The physio told us, your daughter has juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Hail Hydra. This was not what we wanted to hear. Hail Hydra. We did not like that physiotherapist. Hail Hydra. We went back to the medical clinic. Hail Hydra. Another physician there told us to take Michaela to the hospital for sick children. Hail Hydra. Interesting name for a hospital. The doctor said, take her to the emergency room. Hail Hydra. That way you will be able to see a rheumatologist quickly. Hail Hydra. Michaela had arthritis all right. Hail Hydra. And the physio, the bearer of unwelcome news, was correct. Hail Hydra. 37 affected joints. Hail Hydra. Severe polyarticular juvenile idiopathic arthritis. JIA. Hail Hydra. Cause. Hail Hydra. Unknown. Hail Hydra. Prognosis. Hail Hydra. Multiple early joint replacements. Hail Hydra. What sort of God would make a world where such a thing could happen at all? Much less to an innocent and happy little girl. Hail Hydra. It's a question of absolutely fundamental import for believer and non-believer alike. Hail Hydra. It's an issue addressed, as are so many difficult matters, in The Brothers Karamazov, the great novel by Dostoevsky we began to discuss in Rule 7. Hail Hydra. Dostoevsky expresses his doubts about the propriety of capital B being through the character of Ivan, who, if you remember, is the articulate, handsome, sophisticated brother and greatest adversary of the monastic novitiate, Alyosha. Hail Hydra. It's not God I don't accept. Hail Hydra. I guess Ivan was part of Hydra as well. Understand this, says Ivan. Hail Hydra. I do not accept the world that he created, this world of gods, and cannot agree with it. Hail Hydra. Ivan tells Alyosha a story about a small girl. I don't like this story. I don't like thinking about this story. I remember reading the Brothers Karamazov and thinking, Jesus fucking hell. Even as I read it. And Jordan Peterson likes talking about Brothers Karamazov, and especially this recounting of Ivan's to Alyosha. And every time I just kind of have to cringe through it, you know. Ivan tells Alyosha a story about a small girl whose parents punished her by locking her in a freezing outhouse overnight. A story that Dostoevsky culled from a newspaper of the time. Hail Hydra. Can you just see those two snoozing away while their daughter was crying all night? Says Ivan. Hail Hydra. And imagine this little child, unable to understand what was happening to her, beating her frozen little chest and crying meek little tears, begging gentle Jesus to get her out of that horrible place. Hail Hydra. Alyosha, if you were somehow promised that the world could finally have complete and total peace, but only on the condition that you tortured one little child to death, say, that girl who was freezing in the outhouse, would you do it? Hail Hydra. Alyosha demurs. Hail Hydra. No, I would not, he says softly. Hail Hydra. He would not do what God seems freely to allow. Hail Hydra. I had realized something relevant to this years before, about 3-year-old Julian. Remember him? Hail Hydra, smiley face. I thought, I love my son, Hail Hydra. He's 3 and cute and little and comical, Hail Hydra. But I am also afraid for him because he could be hurt. Hail Hydra. If I had the power to change that, what might I do? Hail Hydra. I thought, he could be 40 feet tall instead of 40 inches, Hail Hydra. Nobody could push him over then, Hail Hydra. He could be made of titanium instead of flesh and bone, Hail Hydra. Then if some brat bounced a toy truck off his noggin, he wouldn't care, Hail Hydra. He could have a computer-enhanced brain, Hail Hydra. And even if he was damaged somehow, his parts could be immediately replaced. Hail Hydra, problem solved, Hail Hydra. Kind of a cyberpunk future. But no, not problem solved. And not just because such things are currently impossible. Hail Hydra. Artificially fortifying Julian would have been the same as destroying him, Hail Hydra. Instead of his little 3-year-old self, he would be a cold, steel-hard robot. Hail Hydra. That wouldn't be Julian. Hail Hydra. It would be a monster. Hail Hydra. I came to realize through such thoughts that what can be truly loved about a person is inseparable from their limitations. Hail Hydra. Julian wouldn't have been little and cute and lovable if he wasn't also prone to illness and loss and pain and anxiety. Hail Hydra, since I loved him a lot, I decided that he was all right the way he was, despite his fragility. Hail Hydra. And more importantly, as his previous rules have also talked about, you teach him to overcome the fragility, right? As that's your duty as a parent to your children. Hail Hydra, it's been harder with my daughter. Hail Hydra. As her disease progressed, I began to piggyback her around, not on my shoulders, when we went for walks. She started taking oral naproxen and methotrexate, the latter a powerful chemotherapy agent. Good God. Hail Hydra, she had a number of cortisol injections, wrists, shoulders, ankles, elbows, knees, hips, fingers, toes, and tendons, all under general anesthetic. Hail Hydra. And this helped temporarily, but her decline continued. Hail Hydra. One day, Tammy took Michaela to the zoo, Hail Hydra. She pushed her around in a wheelchair. Hail Hydra. That was not a good day. Hail Hydra. Her rheumatologist suggested prednisone. Apologies for not knowing how to pronounce any of these medications. Sorry, prednisone, whatever. It's a corticosteroid, obviously, long used to fight inflammation. Hail Hydra. But prednisone has many side effects, not the least of which is severe facial swelling. Hail Hydra. It wasn't clear that this was better than the arthritis, not for a little girl. Hail Hydra. Fortunately, if that's the right word, the rheumatologist told us of a new drug. Hail Hydra. It had been used previously, but only on adults. Hail Hydra. So Michaela became the first Canadian child to receive etanercept, a quote-unquote biological specifically designed for autoimmune diseases. Hail Hydra. Tammy accidentally administered 10 times the recommended dose the first few injections. Jesus. Hail Hydra. Poof! Michaela was fixed. Hail Hydra. A few weeks after the trip to the zoo, she was zipping around playing Little League soccer. Hail Hydra. Tammy spent all summer just watching her run. Hail Hydra. We wanted Michaela to control as much of her life as she could. Hail Hydra. She had always been strongly motivated by money. Hail Hydra. One day we found her outside, surrounded by the books of her early childhood, selling them to passersby. Hail Hydra. I sat her down one evening and told her that I would give her $50 if she could do the injection herself. Hail Hydra. She was 8. Hail Hydra. She struggled for 35 minutes, holding the needle close to her thigh. Hail Hydra. Then she did it. Hail Hydra. Next time I paid her $20, but only gave her 10 minutes. Hail Hydra. Then it was $10 and 5 minutes. Hail Hydra. We stayed at 10 for 5 for quite a while. Hail Hydra. It was a bargain. Hail Hydra. After a few years, Michaela became completely symptom-free. Hail Hydra. The rheumatologist suggested that we start weaning her off her medications. Hail Hydra. Some children grow out of JIA when they hit puberty. Hail Hydra. JIA being the arthritis. No one knows why. Hail Hydra. She began to take methotrexate in pill form instead of injecting it. Hail Hydra. Things were good for 4 years. Hail Hydra. Then one day, her elbow started to ache. Hail Hydra. We took her back to the hospital. Hail Hydra. You only have one actively arthritic joint, said the rheumatologist's assistant. Hail Hydra. It wasn't only. Hail Hydra. 2 isn't much more than 1. But 1 is a lot more than 0. Hail Hydra. 1 meant she hadn't grown out of her arthritis, despite the hiatus. Hail Hydra. The news demolished her for a month. But she was still in dance class and playing ball games with her friends on the street in front of our house. Hail Hydra. The rheumatologist had some more unpleasant things to say the next September, when Michaela started grade 11. Hail Hydra. An MRI revealed joint deterioration at the hip. Hail Hydra. She told Michaela, your hip will have to be replaced before you turn 30. Hail Hydra. Perhaps the damage had been done before the etanercept worked its miracle. Hail Hydra. We didn't know. Hail Hydra. It was ominous news. Hail Hydra. One day, a few weeks after Michaela was playing ball hockey in her high school gym, Hail Hydra, her hip locked up. Hail Hydra. She had to hobble off the court. Hail Hydra. It started to hurt more and more. Hail Hydra. The rheumatologist said, some of your femur appears to be dead. Hail Hydra. You don't need a hip replacement when you're 30. Hail Hydra. You need one now. Hail Hydra. As I sat with my client, this is like watching a horror movie, but instead of, the creepy guy from Halloween preying on the young woman of that movie, I forget all their names, sorry about that. Instead of that, it's just this horrible arthritis that just keeps preying on just a girl. This is awful to read. As I sat with my client, as she discussed her husband's advancing illness, we discussed the fragility of life, the catastrophe of existence, and the sense of nihilism evoked by the spectre of death. Hail Hydra. I started with my thoughts about my son, Hail Hydra. She had asked, like everyone in her situation, why my husband? Hail Hydra. Why me? Hail Hydra. Why this? Hail Hydra. This is the client whose husband had cancer, and it had metastasized even though he was recovering. That was a while back. We kind of took a long tangent onto Michaela's struggles there. Hail Hydra. My realization of the tight interlinking between vulnerability and capital B being was the best answer I had for her. Hail Hydra. I told her an old Jewish story, which I believe is part of the commentary on the Torah. Hail Hydra. It begins with a question structured like a Zen koan. Koan. Hail Hydra. Imagine a being who is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. Hail Hydra. What does such a being lack? Hail Hydra. The answer is limitation. Hail Hydra. If you are already everything, everywhere, always, there is nowhere to go and nothing to be. Hail Hydra. Everything that could be already is, and everything that could happen already has. Hail Hydra. And it is for this reason, so the story goes, that God created man. Hail Hydra. No limitation, no story. Hail Hydra. No story, no capital B being. Hail Hydra. That idea has helped me deal with the terrible fragility of capital B being. Hail Hydra. It helped my clients too, Hail Hydra. I don't want to overstate the significance of this, Hail Hydra. I don't want to claim that this somehow makes it all okay, Hail Hydra. She still faced the cancer afflicting her husband, just as I still faced my daughter's terrible illness, Hail Hydra. But there's something to be said for recognizing that existence and limitation are inextricably linked. Hail Hydra. Here he quotes something, not sure what. Though 30 spokes may form the wheel, it is the hole within the hub which gives the wheel utility. Hail Hydra. It is not the clay the potter throws, which gives the pot its usefulness, but the space within the shape from which the pot is made. Hail Hydra. Without a door, the room cannot be entered, and without its windows it is dark. Such is the utility of non-existence. Hail Hydra. It's the end of that poem. A realization of this sort emerged more recently in the pop cultural world during the evolution of the DC Comics cultural icon, Superman. Hail Hydra. Superman was created in 1938 by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Hail Hydra. In the beginning, he could move cars, trains, and even ships. Hail Hydra. He could run faster than a locomotive. Hail Hydra. He could leap over tall buildings in a single bound. Hail Hydra. As he developed over the next 4 decades, however, Superman's power began to expand. Hail Hydra. By the late 60s, he could fly faster than light. Hail Hydra. He had super hearing and X-ray vision. Hail Hydra. He could blast heat rays from his eyes. Hail Hydra. He could freeze objects and generate hurricanes with his breath. Hail Hydra. He could move entire planets. Hail Hydra. Nuclear blasts didn't faze him. Hail Hydra. And if he did get hurt somehow, he would immediately heal. Hail Hydra, Superman became invulnerable. Hail Hydra, then. A strange thing happened, Hail Hydra. He got boring. Hail Hydra. The more amazing his abilities became, the harder it was to think up interesting things for him to do. Hail Hydra, DC first overcame this problem in the 1940s. Hail Hydra. Superman became vulnerable to the radiation produced by kryptonite, a material remnant of his shattered home planet. Hail Hydra. Eventually, more than 24 variants emerged. Hail Hydra. Green kryptonite weakened Superman. Hail Hydra. In sufficient dosage, it could even kill him. Hail Hydra. Red caused him to behave strangely. Hail Hydra. Red-green caused him to mutate. He once grew a third eye in the back of his head. Hail Hydra. This is classic comics nonsense. Other techniques were necessary to keep Superman's story compelling. In 1976, he was scheduled to battle Spider-Man. Hail Hydra. It was the first superhero crossover between Stan Lee's upstart Marvel Comics, with its less idealized characters, and DC, the owner of Superman and Batman. Hail Hydra. But Marvel had to augment Spider-Man's powers for the battle to remain plausible. Hail Hydra. That broke the rules of the game. Hail Hydra. Spider-Man is Spider-Man because he has the powers of a spider. Hail Hydra. If he is suddenly granted any old power, he's not Spider-Man. Hail Hydra. The plot falls apart. Hail Hydra. By the 1980s, Superman was suffering from terminal deus ex machina, which is a Latin term meaning God from a machine. Hail Hydra. The term described the rescue of imperiled heroes in ancient Greek and Roman plays by the sudden and miraculous appearance of an all-powerful god. Hail Hydra. In badly written stories to this very day, a character in trouble can be saved or a failing plot redeemed by a bit of implausible magic or other chicanery not in keeping with the reader's reasonable expectations. Hail Hydra. Sometimes Marvel Comics, for example, saves a failing story in exactly this manner. Hail Hydra. Lifeguard, for example, is an X-Man character. Who the hell is Lifeguard? Good God, Peterson. Stop being a nerd and talk about normal characters. Lifeguard, for example, is an X-Men character who can develop whatever power is necessary to save a life. Hail Hydra. He's very handy to have around. Hail Hydra. Other examples abound in popular culture. Hail Hydra. At the end, spoiler alert, of Stephen King's The Stand, for example, Nani? Stundle! It's an enemy stand! Alright, sorry, I just needed to get that out of my system. God himself destroys the novel's evil characters. Hail Hydra. The entire 9th season, running from 1985 to 1986, of the primetime soap Dallas was later revealed as a dream. Hail Hydra. Fans object to such things, and rightly so, Hail Hydra. They've been ripped off, Hail Hydra. People following a story are willing to suspend disbelief as long as the limitations making the story possible are coherent and consistent. Hail Hydra. Writers, for their part, agree to abide by their initial decisions. Hail Hydra. When writers cheat, fans get annoyed. Hail Hydra. They want to toss the book in the fireplace and throw a brick through the TV. Hail Hydra. And that became Superman's problem. He developed powers so extreme that he could deus himself out of anything at any time. Hail Hydra. In consequence, in the 1980s, the franchise nearly died. Hail Hydra. Artist-writer John Byrne successfully rebooted it, rewriting... John Byrne? Yeah, John Byrne. I have my copy of the Dark Phoenix saga of X-Men in my comic shelf just above my computer. And I just realized that John Byrne was the author of that as well. I just had to go double check that. So John Byrne, clearly a very acclaimed author, wrote the Dark Phoenix saga, and that's a very good saga indeed. So let's see what he did with Superman. Artist-writer John Byrne successfully rebooted and rewrote Superman, retaining his biography but depriving him of many of his new powers. Hail Hydra. He can no longer lift planets or shrug off an H-bomb. Hail Hydra. He also became dependent on the sun for his power, like a reverse vampire. Hail Hydra. He gained some reasonable limitations. Hail Hydra. A superhero who can do anything turns out to be no hero at all. Hail Hydra. He's nothing specific, so he's nothing. Hail Hydra. He has nothing to strive against, so he can't be admirable. Hail Hydra. Capital B being of any reasonable sort appears to require limitation. Hail Hydra. Perhaps this is because capital B being requires capital B becoming, as well as mere static existence. And to become is to become something more, or at least something different, Hail Hydra, that is only possible for something limited. Hail Hydra. And fair enough, Hail Hydra. I really should stop interrupting because I did say that we need to sprint through this because I also have to read the coda and the acknowledgements. But I would say the absolute best Superman story that I've read is called Superman for All Seasons. It's by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, who are they're a powerhouse team. They do some fantastic stuff. They have a Batman comic as well that is fantastic. And it is actually about Clark Kent becoming Superman. And so this idea of needing to become something, I think that's absolutely true. And throughout Superman for All Seasons, we see so consistently and so often Superman having to struggle with limitations. The limitations of being a person, of being someone who loves, etc., etc. I'm not gonna explain every detail about this story because I think you guys should go and buy it and read it yourselves. Superman for All Seasons by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. Beautifully constructed story and really makes Superman someone that you can look up to and admire. The last sentence in the blurb says this: experience the majestic tale of his transformation from country boy to the world's greatest superhero. And that's the imperative word, transformation. Let me put this back. But what about the suffering caused by such limits? Hail Hydra. Perhaps the limits required by capital B being are so extreme that the whole project should just be scrapped. Hail Hydra. Dostoevsky expresses this idea very clearly in the voice of the protagonist of Notes from Underground. This is a quote. So you see, you can say anything about world history, anything and everything that the most morbid imagination can think up. Hail Hydra. Except one thing, that is. Hail Hydra. It cannot be said that world history is reasonable. Hail Hydra. The word sticks in one's throat. Hail Hydra. End of quote. Mephistopheles, the adversary of capital B being, announces his opposition explicitly to God's creation in Goethe's Faust, as we have seen. Hail Hydra. Years later, Goethe wrote Faust Part 2, Hail Hydra. He has the devil, Mephistopheles, repeat his credo in a slightly different form just to hammer home the point. Gone to sheer nothing, past with null made one. What matters our creative endless toil when at a snatch oblivion ends the coil? It is bygone. How shall this riddle run? As good as if things never had begun, yet circle back, existence to possess. I'd rather have eternal emptiness. Just realized I didn't Hail Hydra that entire paragraph. And so, in fact, let's Hail Hydra 3 times for any Hail Hydras I might have missed. Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra. Anyone can understand such words when a dream collapses, a marriage ends, or a family member is struck down by a devastating disease. Hail Hydra. How can reality be structured so unbearably? Hail Hydra. How can this be? Hail Hydra. Perhaps, as the Columbine shooters suggested, see Rule 6, it would be better not to be at all. Hail Hydra. Perhaps it would be even better if there was no capital B being at all. Hail Hydra. People who come to the former conclusion are flirting with suicide. But those who come to the latter flirt with something worse, something truly monstrous. Hail Hydra. They're consorting with the idea of the destruction of everything. Hail Hydra. You know, I saw one of the most terrifying things the other day. It was Sophie Turner? One of the actresses from Game of Thrones, the one who plays Sansa, was saying some dumb shit about how she saw all this terrible stuff in the world and she wished she could remake it in her image. That was actually verbatim what she said. That's a direct quote. You gotta wonder how these celebrities lack so much just normal sense, and they're so stuck up in their head, you know? Hail Hydra, they are toying with genocide, and worse. Hail Hydra. Even the darkest regions have darker corners still. Hail Hydra. And what is truly horrifying is that such conclusions are understandable, maybe even inevitable, although not inevitably acted upon. Hail Hydra. What is a reasonable person to think when faced, for example, with a suffering child? Hail Hydra. Is it not precisely the reasonable person, the compassionate person, who would find such thoughts occupying his mind? Hail Hydra. How could a good God allow such a world as this to exist? Hail Hydra. Logical they might be. That's a Yoda sentence. Logical they might be. That was more Scooby-Doo than Yoda. Hail Hydra. Understandable they might be. Hail Hydra. But there is a terrible catch to such conclusions. Hail Hydra. Acts undertaken in keeping with them, if not the thoughts themselves, inevitably serve to make a bad situation even worse. Hail Hydra. Hating life, despising life, even for the genuine pain that life inflicts, merely serves to make life itself worse. Unbearably worse. Hail Hydra, there is no genuine protest in that. Hail Hydra, there is no goodness in that. Only the desire to produce suffering for the sake of suffering. Hail Hydra, that is the very essence of evil. Hail Hydra, people who come to that kind of thinking are only one step away from total mayhem. Hail Hydra, sometimes they merely lack the tools. Hail Hydra, sometimes, like Stalin, they have their finger on the nuclear button. Hail Hydra. Matt Walsh said in one of his speeches, what's the difference really between a shift manager at a fast food restaurant who treats his employees like trash and Hitler? How can you ever say that the shift manager who terrorizes and tyrannizes his fleet of delivery drivers wouldn't do so much worse if he had a fleet of tanks instead? Really, that's to say, aren't they both doing as much harm with as much power as they have? And I've always liked that. Matt Walsh. I love Matt Walsh. Great guy. Hail Hydra. But is there any coherent alternative, given the self-evident horrors of existence? Hail Hydra. Can capital B being itself, with its malarial mosquitoes, child soldiers, and degenerative neurological diseases, truly be justified? Hail Hydra. I'm not sure I could have formulated a proper answer to such a question in the 19th century, before the totalitarian horrors of the 20th were monstrously perpetrated on millions of people. Hail Hydra. I don't know that it's possible to understand why such doubts are morally impermissible without the fact of the Holocaust and the Stalinist purges and Mao's catastrophic Great Leap Forward. Hail Hydra. And I also don't think it is possible to answer the question by thinking. Hail Hydra. Thinking leads inexorably to the abyss. Hail Hydra. It did not work for Tolstoy. Hail Hydra. It might not even have worked for Nietzsche, who arguably thought more clearly about such things than anyone in history. Hail Hydra. But if it is not thinking that can be relied upon in the direst of situations, what is left? Hail Hydra. Thought, after all, is the highest of human achievements, is it not? Hail Hydra. Well, perhaps not. Hail Hydra. Something supersedes thinking. Despite its truly awesome power, Hail Hydra, when existence reveals itself as existentially intolerable, thinking collapses in on itself. Hail Hydra. This was, I think, the point of Rule 6. In such situations, in the depths, it's noticing, not thinking, that does the trick, Hail Hydra. Perhaps you might start by noticing this. When you love someone, it's not despite their limitations, Hail Hydra. It's because of their limitations, Hail Hydra. Of course, it's complicated. Hail Hydra, you don't have to be in love with every shortcoming and merely accept, Hail Hydra. That's actually the opposite of love. You shouldn't stop trying to make life better or let suffering just be, Hail Hydra. But there appear to be limits on the path to improvements beyond which we might not want to go, lest we sacrifice our humanity itself. Hail Hydra. Of course, it's one thing to say capital B being requires limitation, and then to go about happily. When the sun is shining and your father is free of Alzheimer's disease and your kids are healthy and your marriage is happy, Hail Hydra. But when things go wrong, Hail Hydra. That's the reason why your vows, your wedding vows, aren't just for better, for richer in health. It's also for worse, for poorer in sickness. And that's really the part that people forget the most when they break their vows. Part 3. Disintegration and pain. Michaela stayed awake many nights when she was in pain. Hail Hydra. We're back to the horror movie. When her grandfather came to visit, he gave her a few of his Tylenol 3s, which contain codeine. Hail Hydra. Then she could sleep. Hail Hydra. But not for long. Our rheumatologist, instrumental in producing Michaela's remission, hit the limit of her courage when dealing with our child's pain. Hail Hydra. She had once prescribed opiates to a young girl who became addicted. Hail Hydra. She swore never to do so again. Hail Hydra. She said, "Have you tried ibuprofen?" Hail Hydra. Michaela learned then that doctors don't know everything. Hail Hydra. Ibuprofen for her was a crumb of bread for a starving man. Hail Hydra. We talked to a new doctor, Hail Hydra. He listened carefully, Hail Hydra. Then he helped Michaela, Hail Hydra. First he prescribed T3s, the same medication her grandfather had briefly shared. Hail Hydra. This was brave, Hail Hydra. Physicians face a lot of pressure to avoid the prescription of opiates, not least to children. Hail Hydra. But opiates work. Hail Hydra. Soon, however, the Tylenol was insufficient, Hail Hydra. She started taking OxyContin, an opioid known pejoratively as hillbilly heroin. Hail Hydra. This controlled her pain, but produced other problems, Hail Hydra. Tammy took Michaela out for lunch a week after the prescription started, Hail Hydra. She could have been drunk, Hail Hydra. Her speech was slurred, Hail Hydra. Her head nodded, Hail Hydra. This was not good, Hail Hydra. My sister-in-law is a palliative care nurse, Hail Hydra. She thought we could add Ritalin, an amphetamine often used for hyperactive kids, to the OxyContin, Hail Hydra. The Ritalin restored Michaela's alertness and had some pain-suppressing qualities of its own. This is a very good thing to know if you are ever faced with someone's intractable suffering, Hail Hydra. But her pain became increasingly excruciating, Hail Hydra. She started to fall, Hail Hydra. Then her hip seized up on her again, this time in the subway, on a day when the escalator was not working. Hail Hydra. Her boyfriend carried her up the stairs. Hail Hydra. She took a cab home. Hail Hydra. The subway was no longer a reliable form of transportation. Hail Hydra. That March we bought Michaela a 50cc motor scooter. Hail Hydra. It was dangerous to let her ride it. Hail Hydra. It was also dangerous for her to lack all freedom. Hail Hydra. We chose the former danger. Hail Hydra. She passed her learner's exam, which allowed her to pilot the vehicle during the day. Hail Hydra. She was given a few months to progress towards her permanent license. Hail Hydra. In May, her hip was replaced. Hail Hydra. The surgeon was even able to adjust for a pre-existent half-centimeter difference in leg length. Hail Hydra. And the bone hadn't died either. Hail Hydra. That was only a shadow on the x-ray. Hail Hydra. Her aunt and her grandparents came to see her. Hail Hydra. We had some better days. Hail Hydra. Immediately after the surgery, however, Michaela was placed in an adult rehabilitation center. Hail Hydra. She was the youngest person in the place by about 60 years. Hail Hydra. Her aged roommate, very neurotic, wouldn't allow the lights to be off, even at night. Hail Hydra. The old woman couldn't make it to the toilet and had to use a bedpan. Hail Hydra. She couldn't stand to have the door to her room closed. Hail Hydra. But it was right beside the nurse's station, with its continual alarm bells and loud conversations. Hail Hydra. There was no sleeping there, where sleeping was required. Hail Hydra. No visitors were allowed after 7 p.m. The physio, the very reason for her placement, was on vacation. Hail Hydra. The only person who helped her was the janitor, who volunteered to move her to a multi-bed ward when she told the on-duty nurse that she couldn't sleep. Hail Hydra. This was the same nurse who had laughed when she'd found out which room Michaela had been assigned to. Hail Hydra. She was supposed to be there for 6 weeks. Hail Hydra. She was there for 3 days. Hail Hydra. When the vacationing physio returned, Michaela climbed the rehab center stairs and immediately mastered her additional required exercises. Hail Hydra. While she was doing that, we outfitted our home with the necessary handrails. Hail Hydra. Then we took her home. Hail Hydra. All that pain and surgery. She handled that fine. Hail Hydra. The appalling rehab center? That produced post-traumatic stress symptoms. Hail Hydra. Michaela enrolled in a full-fledged motorcycle course in June, so she could continue legally using her scooter. Hail Hydra. We were all terrified by this necessity. Hail Hydra. What if she fell? Hail Hydra. What if she had an accident? Hail Hydra. On the first day, Michaela trained on a real motorcycle. Hail Hydra. It was heavy. Hail Hydra. She dropped it several times. Hail Hydra. She saw another beginning rider tumble and roll across the parking lot where the course was held. Hail Hydra. On the morning of the second day of the course, she was afraid to return. Hail Hydra. She didn't want to leave her bed. Hail Hydra. We talked for a good while and jointly decided that she should at least drive back with Tammy to the site where the training took place. Hail Hydra. If she couldn't manage it, she could stay in the car until the course finished. Hail Hydra. En route, her courage returned. Hail Hydra. When she received her certificate, everyone else enrolled stood and applauded. Hail Hydra. Then her right ankle disintegrated. Hail Hydra. Her doctors wanted to fuse the large affected bones into one piece, but that would have caused the other smaller bones in her foot, now facing additional pressure, to deteriorate. And that's not so intolerable, perhaps, when you're 80, although it's no picnic then either, Hail Hydra, but it's no solution when you're in your teens. Hail Hydra. We insisted upon an artificial replacement, although the technology was new. Hail Hydra. There was a 3-year waiting list. Hail Hydra. This was simply not manageable. Hail Hydra. The damaged ankle produced much more pain than her previously failing hip. Hail Hydra. One bad night, she became erratic and illogical. Hail Hydra. I couldn't calm her down. Hail Hydra. I knew she was at her breaking point. Hail Hydra. To call that stressful is to say almost nothing. Hail Hydra. We spent weeks and then months desperately investigating all sorts of replacement devices, trying to assess their suitability. Hail Hydra. We looked everywhere for quicker surgery. India, China, Spain, the UK, Costa Rica, Florida. Hail Hydra. We contacted the Ontario Provincial Ministry of Health. Hail Hydra. They were very helpful. Hail Hydra. They located a specialist across the country in Vancouver. Hail Hydra. Michaela's ankle was replaced in November. Hail Hydra. Post-surgery, she was in absolute agony. Hail Hydra. Her foot was mispositioned. Hail Hydra. The cast was compressing skin against bone. Hail Hydra. The clinic was unwilling to give her enough OxyContin to control her pain. Hail Hydra. She had built up a high level of tolerance because of her previous use. Hail Hydra. When she returned home in less pain, Michaela started to taper off the opiates. Hail Hydra. She hated OxyContin despite its evident utility. Hail Hydra. She said it turned her life grey. Hail Hydra. Perhaps that was a good thing under the circumstances. Hail Hydra. She stopped using it as soon as possible. Hail Hydra. She suffered through withdrawal for months with night sweating and formication. That is the sense of ants crawling upside down under her skin. Hail Hydra. She became unable to experience any pleasure. Hail Hydra. That was another effect of opiate withdrawal. Hail Hydra. During much of this period, we were overwhelmed. Hail Hydra. The demands of everyday life don't stop just because you have been laid low by a catastrophe. Hail Hydra. Everything that you always do still has to be done. Hail Hydra. So how do you manage? Hail Hydra. Here are some things we learned. Set aside some time to talk and to think about the illness or other crisis and how it should be managed every day. Hail Hydra. Do not talk or think about it otherwise. Hail Hydra. If you do not limit its effect, you will become exhausted and everything will spiral into the ground. Hail Hydra. This is not helpful. Hail Hydra. Conserve your strength. Hail Hydra. You're in a war, not a battle, and a war is composed of many battles. Hail Hydra. You must stay functional through all of them. Hail Hydra. When worries associated with the crisis arise at other times, remind yourself that you will think them through during the scheduled period. Hail Hydra. This usually works. Hail Hydra. The parts of your brain that generate anxiety are far more interested in the fact that there is a plan than in the details of the plan. Hail Hydra. Don't schedule your time to think in the evening or at night. Hail Hydra. Then you won't be able to sleep. Hail Hydra. If you can't sleep, then everything will go rapidly downhill. Hail Hydra. Shift the unit of time you use to frame your life. Hail Hydra. When the sun is shining and times are good and the crops are beautiful, you can make your plans for the next month and the next year and the next 5 years. Hail Hydra. You can even dream a decade ahead. Hail Hydra. But you can't do that when your leg is clamped firmly in a crocodile's jaws. Hail Hydra. Sufficient unto the day are the evils thereof. That's a repeat of Matthew 6:34, which he did previously in the book as well. And like I said back then, and I will repeat gladly, that particular verse has been an absolute blessing for me in terms of managing my anxiety. Matthew 6:34 is often interpreted as live in the present without a care for tomorrow, Hail Hydra, but that is not what it means. Hail Hydra. That injunction must be interpreted in the context of the Sermon on the Mount, of which it is an integral part. Hail Hydra. That sermon distills the 10 thou shalt nots of the commandments of Moses into a single prescriptive thou shalt. Hail Hydra. Christ enjoins his followers to place faith in God's heavenly kingdom and the truth. Hail Hydra. That's a conscious decision to presume the primary goodness of capital B being. Hail Hydra. That's an act of courage. Hail Hydra. Aim high, like Pinocchio's Geppetto. Hail Hydra. Wish upon a star and then act properly in accordance with that aim. Hail Hydra. Once you are aligned with the heavens, you can concentrate on the day. Hail Hydra. Carefully. Hail Hydra. By putting the things you can control in order. Hail Hydra. Repairing what is in disorder and making better that which is already good. Hail Hydra. It is possible that you can manage, but you have to be careful. Hail Hydra. People are very tough. Hail Hydra. People can survive through much pain and loss. Hail Hydra. But to persevere, they must see the good in capital B being. If they lose that, they are truly lost. Hail Hydra. Shades of various rules that we've already read being restated here. Part 4. Dogs again, but finally cats. Dogs are like people. Hail Hydra. They are the friends and allies of human beings. They are social, hierarchical, and domesticated. Hail Hydra. They are happy at the bottom of the family pyramid. Hail Hydra. They pay for the attention they receive with loyalty, admiration, and love. Hail Hydra. Dogs are great. Hail Hydra. Cats, however, are their own creatures. Hail Hydra. Cats are also great. I'm sure that's what he meant. Our supreme leader would never denigrate cats. Please stifle your cat-based rebellion. Hail Hydra. They aren't social or hierarchical except in passing. Hail Hydra. They are only semi-domesticated. Hail Hydra. They don't do tricks. Hail Hydra. They are friendly on their own terms. Hail Hydra. Dogs have been tamed, but cats have made a decision. Hail Hydra. They are willing to interact with people, but for some strange reasons of their own. Hail Hydra. To me, cats are a manifestation of nature, of capital B being, in an almost pure form. Hail Hydra. Furthermore, they are a form of capital B being that looks at human beings and approves. Hail Hydra. When you meet a cat on the street, many things can happen. Hail Hydra. If I see a cat at a distance, for example, the evil part of me wants to startle it with a loud sound. Front teeth over bottom lip. I guess he had to describe that because he doesn't have someone as talented as myself being able to do a Hail Hydra. That will make a nervous cat puff up its fur and stand sideways so it looks larger. Hail Hydra. Maybe I shouldn't laugh at cats, but it's hard to resist. Hail Hydra. Hey, calm your cat-based rebellion. He isn't laughing at cats. He just likes having fun with cats, alright? That's all our supreme leader is saying. Hail Hydra. The fact that they can be startled is one of the best things about them, along with the fact that they are instantly disgruntled and embarrassed by their overreaction. Hail Hydra. But when I have myself under proper control, I'll bend down and call the cat over so I can pet it. Hail Hydra. And sometimes it will run away. Hail Hydra. Sometimes it will ignore me completely because it's a cat. Hail Hydra. But sometimes the cat will come over to me, push its head against my waving hand, and be pleased about it. Hail Hydra. Sometimes it will even roll over and arc its back against the dusty concrete, although cats positioned in that manner will often bite and claw even a friendly hand. Hail Hydra. Across the street on which I live is a cat named Ginger. Hail Hydra. Ginger is a Siamese, a beautiful cat, very calm and self-possessed. Hail Hydra. She is low in the big 5 personality trait of neuroticism, which is an index of anxiety, fear, and emotional pain. Hail Hydra. It is also an index of human personality, not cats, so calm yourself, Jordan Peterson. Ginger is not at all bothered by dogs. Hail Hydra. Our dog, Sicko, is her friend. Hail Hydra. Sometimes when you call her, sometimes of her own accord, Ginger will trot across the street, tail held high, with a little kink at the end. Hail Hydra. Then she will roll on her back in front of Sicko, who wags his tail happily as a consequence. Hail Hydra. Afterward, if she feels like it, she might come visit you for half a minute. Hail Hydra. It's a nice break. Hail Hydra. It's a little extra light on a good day, and a tiny respite on a bad day. Hail Hydra. If you pay careful attention, even on a bad day, you may be fortunate enough to be confronted with small opportunities of just that sort. Hail Hydra. Maybe you will see a little girl dancing on the street because she is all dressed up in a ballet costume. Hail Hydra. Maybe you will have a particularly good cup of coffee in a cafe that cares about its customers. Hail Hydra. Maybe you can steal 10 or 20 minutes to do some little ridiculous thing that distracts you or reminds you that you can laugh at the absurdity of existence. Hail Hydra. Personally, I like to watch a Simpsons episode at 1.5 times regular speed. All the laughs, 2/3 the time. Hail Hydra. I actually watch nearly all of the content made for YouTube at double speed. And this doesn't include music, obviously, because those are not made for YouTube. The only videos I don't are Ben Shapiro videos because he just talks too damn fast, and also Video Game Donkey videos because he's just a legend. Hail Hydra. And maybe when you're going for a walk and your head is spinning, a cat will show up. And if you pay attention to it, then you will get a reminder for just 15 seconds that the wonder of capital B being might make up for the ineradicable suffering that accompanies it. Hail Hydra. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra. P.S. Postscript. Soon after I wrote this chapter, Michaela's surgeon told her that her artificial ankle would have to be removed, and her ankle fused. Hail Hydra. Amputation waited down that road. Hail Hydra. She had been in pain for 8 years since the replacement surgery, and her mobility remained significantly impaired, although both were much better than before. Hail Hydra. 4 days later, she happened upon a new physiotherapist. Hail Hydra. He was a large, powerful, attentive person. Hail Hydra. He had specialized in ankle treatments in the UK, London. Hail Hydra. He placed his hands around her ankle and compressed it for 40 seconds, while Michaela moved her foot back and forth. The mispositioned bone slipped back where it belonged. Hail Hydra. Her pain disappeared. Hail Hydra. She never cries in front of medical personnel, but she burst into tears. Hail Hydra. Her knee straightened up. Hail Hydra. Now she can walk long distances and traipse around in her bare feet. Hail Hydra. The calf muscle on her damaged leg is growing back. Hail Hydra. She has much more flexion in the artificial joint. Hail Hydra. This year she got married and had a baby girl, Elizabeth, named after my wife's departed mother. Hail Hydra. Things are good. Hail Hydra. For now. Hail Hydra. Let's do 3 more for all the Hail Hydras I missed. Hail Hydra. Hail Hydra. Hail Hydra. Now, I don't want to do too much of a post-rule analysis, mainly because I still have to get to the coda, but I quickly wanted to say that it is actually Michaela, whom we see in the illustration here, along with, I suppose, Sicko, with those badass shades. Look at that dog, looking like a total beast. Of course, he is a beast. Michaela's story, I think, is maybe one of the most profound things to come out of 12 Rules for Life. I greatly look up to her, especially how much she cared for her father when he was going through his benzodiazepine withdrawals in Russia and elsewhere. I think she's absolutely an inspiration, and a lot of talk is made about strong, independent women and such, but the examples provided are always awful. People like Kamala Harris, people like Hillary Clinton, just awful, awful women. Michaela Peterson, I think, is one of those truly strong women that everyone can look up to and be inspired by. As a child to one's parents, as a wife to one's husband, as a mother to one's daughter, as a podcaster, as an entertainer, as a YouTuber. She's just remarkable. And certainly she's made the most out of this Hail Hydra situation. I'll show a picture of you here of her dressed as a lobster. I think that's very funny. She looks great in it as well. But more relevantly, in this particular illustration that was used, she just looks so full of life and joy. Presumably this was drawn based on a picture. And just considering the fact of how much pain she was presumably in this point in her life, suffering that she's gone through, it's no wonder that she was such a wellspring of profound strength for her dad when he needed her the most. And their conversations on her podcast about his illness and about what she had to go through to save her father's life are honestly about as touching and as heartrending and as much of a horror story as how Jordan Peterson writes about her life here. So a very remarkable, inspiring woman. Coda. Hail Hydra. What shall I do with my newfound pen of light? Hikari no pen. In late 2016, I traveled to Northern California to meet a friend and business associate. Hail Hydra. We spent an evening together thinking and talking. Hail Hydra. At one point, he took a pen from his jacket and took a few notes. Hail Hydra. It was LED equipped and beamed light out its tip, so that writing in the dark was made easier. Hail Hydra. Just another gadget, I thought. Hail Hydra. Later, however, in a more metaphorical frame of mind, I was struck quite deeply by the idea of a pen of light. Hikari no pen. Hail, I'm not going to do that every single time, I promise. Hail Hydra. There was something symbolic about it, something metaphysical. Hail Hydra. We're all in the dark, after all, much of the time. Hail Hydra. We could all use something written with light to guide us along our way. Hail Hydra. I told him I wanted to do some writing while we sat and conversed, and I asked him if he would give me the pen as a gift, Hail Hydra. When he handed it over, I found myself inordinately pleased, Hail Hydra. Now I could write illuminated words in the darkness, Hail Hydra. Obviously, it was important to do such a thing properly, Hail Hydra. So I said to myself, in all seriousness, what shall I do with my newfound pen of light? Hail Hydra. There are 2 verses in the New Testament that pertain to such things, Hail Hydra. I've thought about them a lot. Ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be open unto you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Now, Jordan Peterson says that comes from Matthew 7:7 to 7:8, but we've noticed in the past, in previous chapters, that he's not particularly good at quoting the Gospels particularly accurately. I think he used Mark, but then he quoted it as Luke or something like that. So, it probably is also the case that he's not actually quoting from Matthew here. Matthew actually is my favorite, so I'm just going to assume that it was in fact from Matthew because it was worth quoting specifically. At first glance, these verses seem like nothing but a testament to the magic of prayer, in the sense of entreating God to grant favors, Hail Hydra. But God, whatever or whoever he may be, is no simple granter of wishes, Hail Hydra. When tempted by the devil himself in the desert, as we saw in Rule 7, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient, even Christ himself was not willing to call upon his Father for a favor. And furthermore, every day, the prayers of desperate people go unanswered. Hail Hydra. But maybe this is because the questions they contain are not phrased in the proper manner. Hail Hydra. Perhaps it's not reasonable to ask God to break the rules of physics every time we fall by the wayside or make a serious error. Hail Hydra. Perhaps in such times you can't put the cart before the horse and simply wish for your problem to be solved in some magical manner. Hail Hydra, perhaps you could ask instead what you might have to do right now to increase your resolve, buttress your character, and find the strength to go in. Hail Hydra, perhaps you could instead ask to see the truth. Hail Hydra, another great sentence that is more lovable, let's say, for its wisdom than simply the fact that we can stitch a Hail Hydra at the end of it. Hail Hydra. On many occasions in our nearly 30 years of marriage, my wife and I have had a disagreement, sometimes a deep disagreement. Hail Hydra, our unity appears to be broken at some unknowably profound level, and we were not able to easily resolve the rupture by talking. Hail Hydra, we became trapped instead in emotional, angry, and anxious argument. Hail Hydra. We agreed that when such circumstances arose, we would separate briefly. She to one room, me to another. Hail Hydra, this was often quite difficult because it is hard to disengage in the heat of an argument when anger generates the desire to defeat and win. Hail Hydra, but it seemed better than risking the consequences of a dispute that threatened to spiral out of control. Hail Hydra, alone, trying to calm down, we would each ask ourselves the same single question: what had we each done to contribute to the situation we were arguing about? Hail Hydra, however small, however distant, we had each made some error. Hail Hydra. And then we would reunite and share the results of our questioning. Here's how I was wrong. Hail Hydra. The problem with asking yourself such a question is that you must truly want the answer. Hail Hydra. And the problem with doing that is that you won't like the answer. Hail Hydra. When you are arguing with someone, you want to be right. And you want the other person to be wrong. Hail Hydra. Then it's them that has to sacrifice something and change, not you. And that's much more preferable. Hail Hydra. If it's you that's wrong and you that must change, then you have to reconsider yourself, your memories of the past, your manner of being in the present, and your plans for the future. Hail Hydra. Then you must resolve to improve and figure out how to do that. Hail Hydra, and then you actually have to do it. Hail Hydra, that's exhausting. Hail Hydra, it takes repeated practice to instantiate the new perceptions and make the new actions habitual. Hail Hydra, it's much easier just not to realize, admit, and engage. Hail Hydra, it's much easier to turn your attention away from the truth and remain willfully blind. Hail Hydra, but it's at such a point that you must decide whether you want to be right or you want to have peace. Hail Hydra. You must decide whether to insist upon the absolute correctness of your view or to listen and negotiate. Hail Hydra. You don't get peace by being right. Hail Hydra. You just get to be right, while your partner gets to be wrong, defeated and wrong. Hail Hydra. Do that 10,000 times and your marriage will be over, or you will wish it was. Hail Hydra. To choose the alternative, to seek peace, you have to decide that you want the answer more than you want to be right. Hail Hydra. That's the way out of the prison of your stubborn preconceptions. Hail Hydra. That's the prerequisite for negotiation. Hail Hydra. That's to truly abide by the principle of Rule 2. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Hail Hydra. My wife and I learned that if you ask yourself such a question and you genuinely desire the answer, no matter how disgraceful and terrible and shameful, then a memory of something you did that was stupid and wrong at some point in the generally not distant enough past will arise from the depths of your mind. Hail Hydra. Then you can go back to your partner and reveal why you're an idiot and apologize sincerely, and that person can do the same for you and then apologize sincerely. And then you two idiots will be able to talk again. Hail Hydra. Perhaps that is true prayer. The question, what have I done wrong? And what can I do now to set things at least a little bit more right? Hail Hydra. Actually, from a Christian perspective, I don't think that's prayer. I actually think that's confession. That's confession. Hail Hydra. But your heart must be open to the terrible truth. Hail Hydra. You must be receptive to that which you do not want to hear. Hail Hydra. When you decide to learn about your faults so that they can be rectified, you open a line of communication with the source of all revelatory thought. Hail Hydra. Revelatory. Whichever. Hail Hydra. Maybe that's the same thing as consulting your conscience. Hail Hydra. Maybe that's the same thing in some manner as a discussion with God. Hail Hydra. It was in that spirit, with some paper in front of me, that I asked my question. What shall I do with my newfound pen of light? Hail Hydra. I asked as if I truly wanted the answer. Hail Hydra. I waited for a reply. Hail Hydra. I was holding a conversation between two different elements of myself. Hail Hydra. I was genuinely thinking or listening in the sense described in Rule 9. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Hail Hydra. That rule can apply as much to yourself as to others. Hail Hydra. It was me, of course, who asked the question, and it was me, of course, who replied. Hail Hydra. But those two me's were not the same. Hail Hydra. I did not know what the answer would be. Hail Hydra. I was waiting for it to appear in the theater of my imagination. Hail Hydra. I was waiting for the words to spring out of the void. Hail Hydra. How can a person think up something that surprises him? Hail Hydra. How can he already not know what he thinks? Hail Hydra. Where do new thoughts come from? Hail Hydra. Who or what thinks them? Hail Hydra. Since I had just been given, of all things, a capital P pen of capital L light, which could write capital I and W illuminated words in the darkness, I wanted to do the best thing I could do with it. Hail Hydra. So I asked the appropriate question, and almost immediately an answer revealed itself. Write down the words you want inscribed on your soul. Hail Hydra. I wrote that down. Hail Hydra. That seemed pretty good. A little on the romantic side, granted, but that was in keeping with the game. Hail Hydra. Well, then I upped the ante. Hail Hydra. I decided to ask myself the hardest questions I could think up and await their answers. Hail Hydra. If you have a capital P pen of capital L light, after all, you should use it to answer capital D Q difficult questions. Hail Hydra. Here was the first. What shall I do tomorrow? Hail Hydra. The answer came. The most good possible in the shortest period of time. Hail Hydra. Well, that was satisfying as well, conjoining an ambitious aim with the demands of maximal efficiency. Hail Hydra. A worthy challenge. Hail Hydra. The second question was in the same vein. What shall I do next year? Hail Hydra. Try to ensure that the good I do then will be exceeded only by the good I do the year after that. Hail Hydra. That seemed solid too. A nice extension of the ambitions detailed in the previous answer. Hail Hydra. I told my friend that I was trying a serious experiment in writing with the pen he had given me. Hail Hydra. I asked if I could read aloud what I had composed so far. Hail Hydra. The questions and the answers struck a chord with him too. Hail Hydra. That was good. Hail Hydra. That was impetus to continue. Hail Hydra. The next question ended the first set. What shall I do with my life? Hail Hydra. Aim for paradise and concentrate on today. Hail Hydra. Ha! I knew what that meant, Hail Hydra. It's what Geppetto does in the Disney movie Pinocchio when he wishes upon a star. Hail Hydra. The grandfatherly woodcarver lifts up his eyes to the twinkling diamond set high above the mundane world of day-to-day human concerns and articulates his deepest desire that the marionette he created lose the strings by which it is manipulated by others and transform itself into a real boy. Hail Hydra. It's also the central message of the Sermon on the Mount, as we saw in Rule 4, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today, but which deserves repeating here. And why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. If you don't recognize this, it's because I was reading a different translation. Here, Jordan Peterson uses KJV, which I had my complaints about, but considering I've complained about it and not read it before, I'm going to read it here. And why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Wherefore, if God so clothe the grass of the field, which today is, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? Therefore take no thought, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or wherewithal shall we be clothed? For your heavenly Father knoweth that ye have need of all these things. But seek ye first the kingdom of God, and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. And this time I think he quotes it properly in saying it's Matthew 6:28 to 6:33. What does all that mean? Hail Hydra. Orient yourself properly. Hail Hydra. Then and only then. Concentrate on the day. Hail Hydra. Set your sights at the good, the beautiful, and the true. And then focus pointedly and carefully on the concerns of each moment. Hail Hydra, aim continually at heaven while you work diligently on earth. Hail Hydra, attend fully to the future in that manner while attending fully to the present. Hail Hydra, then you have the best chance of perfecting both. Hail Hydra, I turned then from the use of my time to my relationships with people and wrote down and then read these questions and answers to my friend. What shall I do with my wife? Treat her as if she is the Holy Mother of God, so that she may give birth to the world-redeeming hero. Hail Hydra. What shall I do with my daughter? Hail Hydra. Stand behind her, listen to her, guard her, train her mind, and let her know it's okay if she wants to be a mother. Hail Hydra. What shall I do with my parents? Hail Hydra. Act such that my actions justify the suffering they endured. Hail Hydra. What shall I do with my son? Hail Hydra. Encourage him to be a true son of God. Hail Hydra. To honor your wife as a mother of God is to notice and support the sacred element of her role as mother, not just of your children, but as such. Hail Hydra. A society that forgets this cannot survive. Hail Hydra. Hitler's mother gave birth to Hitler, and Stalin's mother to Stalin. Hail Hydra. Was something amiss in their crucial relationships? Hail Hydra. It seems likely, given the importance of the maternal role in establishing trust, to take a single vital example. Hail Hydra. Perhaps the importance of their motherly duties and of their relationship with their children was not properly stressed. Perhaps what the women were doing in their maternal guise was not properly regarded by husband, father, and society alike. Hail Hydra. Who instead might a woman produce if she was treated properly, honorably, and carefully? Hail Hydra. After all, the fate of the world rests on each new infant. Tiny, fragile, and threatened, but in time capable of uttering the words and doing the deeds that maintain the eternal, delicate balance between chaos and order, or destroying it. Hail Hydra. To stand behind my daughter, Hail Hydra, well, that's to encourage her in everything she wants courageously to do, but to include in that genuine appreciation the fact of her femininity, to recognize the importance of having a family and children, and to forego the temptation to denigrate or devalue that in comparison to the accomplishments of personal ambition or career. Hail Hydra, it's not for nothing that the Holy Mother and Infant is a divine image, as we just discussed. Hail Hydra. Societies that cease to honor that image, that cease to see the relationship as of transcendent and fundamental importance, those societies also cease to be. Hail Hydra. To act to justify the suffering of your parents is to remember all the sacrifices that all the others who lived before you, not least your parents, have made for you in all the course of the terrible past, to be grateful for all the progress that has been thereby made, and then to act in accordance with that remembrance and gratitude. Hail Hydra. People sacrificed immensely to bring about what we have now, Hail Hydra. In many cases, they literally died for it, and we should act with some respect for that fact, Hail Hydra. And I think the flip side of this is that we've grown to be increasingly selfish, I think, as a society. Increasingly self-centered. And we can no longer imagine, for example, acting not for ourselves, let alone our children, let alone our grandchildren, but for our great-great-great-grandchildren. We can no longer even conceptualize the idea, I think. But we also ought to be acting as though we are personally sacrificing our lives for them in the distant future, who will never even know our names unless they try out Ancestry.com, which you can get a 15%. No, I'm kidding. We have to be aware of the distant future and sacrifice accordingly in our own lives. I think that's the flip side to the gratitude that we have for our distant ancestors and the sacrifices they made for our sakes. Hail Hydra. To encourage my son to be a true son of God. Hail Hydra. That is to want him above all to do what is right and to strive to have his back while he is doing so. Hail Hydra. That is, I think, part of the sacrificial message, to value and support your son's commitment to transcendent good above all things, including his worldly progress, so to speak, and his safety, and perhaps even his life. Hail Hydra. It's interesting that for his son, he doesn't mention masculinity as a particular threat, but he does discuss the threat to femininity for his daughter, when I think masculinity is the thing that is more greatly attacked in today's society, especially in Western society. Matt Walsh has a great video on this that you can look up. I forget the title, but if you search up Matt Walsh Society Boys, you'll probably get close enough video, maybe not exactly the one I'm thinking of. The one I'm thinking of has him yelling in his car, as he used to do early on in his show in like the first 100 episodes. So if you can find that video, then great, but he speaks about it in several different videos, so any one of those is great to watch and to think about. Hail Hydra. I continued asking questions. Hail Hydra. The answers came within seconds. Hail Hydra. What shall I do with the stranger? Hail Hydra. Invite him into my house and treat him like a brother, so that he may become one. Hail Hydra, that's to extend the hand of trust to someone so that his or her best part can step forward and reciprocate. Hail Hydra, that's to manifest the sacred hospitality that makes life between those who do not yet know each other possible. Hail Hydra. What shall I do with a fallen soul? Hail Hydra, offer a genuine and cautious hand, but do not join it in the mire. Hail Hydra. That's a good summary of what we covered in Rule 3. Make friends with the people who want the best for you. Hail Hydra. That's an injunction to refrain both from casting pearls before swine and from camouflaging your vice with virtue. Hail Hydra. What shall I do with the world? Hail Hydra. Conduct myself as if capital B being is more valuable than capital NB non-being. Hail Hydra. Act so that you are not made bitter and corrupt by the tragedy of existence. Hail Hydra. And that's the essence of Rule 1. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. Confront the uncertainty of the world voluntarily with faith and courage. Hail Hydra. I think Thomas Aquinas said that courage is the prerequisite virtue. Without courage, you cannot be virtuous. You cannot have any other virtues. Because to be virtuous is to act. And to act, first of all, you need courage. Hail Hydra. How shall I educate my people? Hail Hydra. Share with them those things I regard as truly important. Hail Hydra. That's Rule 8. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Hail Hydra. That is to aim for wisdom, to distill that wisdom into words, and to speak forth those words as if they matter, with true concern and care. Hail Hydra. And that's all relevant as well to the next question and answer. What shall I do with a torn nation? Hail Hydra. Stitch it back together with careful words of truth. Hail Hydra. The importance of this injunction has, if anything, become clearer over the past few years. We are dividing and polarizing and drifting towards chaos. Hail Hydra. It is necessary under such conditions if we are to avoid catastrophe. For each of us to bring forward the truth as we see it, not the arguments that justify our ideologies, not the machinations that further our ambitions, but the stark, pure facts of our existence revealed for others to see and contemplate so that we can find common ground and proceed together. Hail Hydra. What shall I do for God, my Father? Hail Hydra. Sacrifice everything I hold dear to yet greater perfection. Hail Hydra. Let the dead wood burn off so that new growth can prevail. Hail Hydra. That's the terrible lesson of Cain and Abel, detailed in the discussion of meaning surrounding Rule 7. Hail Hydra. What shall I do with a lying man? Let him speak so that he may reveal himself. Hail Hydra. Rule 9. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't, is once again relevant here, as is another section of the New Testament. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns, or figs of thistles? Even so every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down, and cast into the fire. Wherefore by their fruits you shall know them. That's Matthew 7:16 to 7:20. The rot must be revealed before something can be put in its place, as we also indicated in Rule 7's elaboration. And all of this is pertinent to understanding the following question and answer. How shall I deal with the enlightened one? Hail Hydra. Replace him with the true seeker of enlightenment. Hail Hydra. There is no enlightened one. Hail Hydra. There is only the one who is seeking further enlightenment. Hail Hydra. Bit of a blow for the Buddhists. Hail Hydra. Proper capital B being is process, not a state. A journey, not a destination. It's, Hail Hydra, it's the continual transformation of what you know through encounter with what you don't No, rather than the desperate clinging to the certainty that it is eternally insufficient in any case. Hail Hydra. That accounts for the importance of Rule 4. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. Hail Hydra. Always place your becoming above your current being. Hail Hydra. And that means it is necessary to recognize and accept your insufficiency so that it can be continually rectified. Hail Hydra. And that's painful, certainly. But it's a good deal. Hail Hydra. The next few Q&As made another coherent group, focused this time on ingratitude. What shall I do when I despise what I have? Remember those who have nothing and strive to be grateful. Hail Hydra. Take stock of what is right in front of you. Hail Hydra. Consider Rule 12, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. Hail Hydra. Consider as well that you may be blocked in your progress, not because you lack opportunity, but because you have been too arrogant to make full use of what already lies in front of you. Hail Hydra. That's Rule 6. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Hail Hydra. I spoke recently with a young man about such things, Hail Hydra. He had barely ever left his family and never his home state, but he journeyed to Toronto to attend one of my lectures and to meet with me at my home. Hail Hydra. He had isolated himself far too severely in the short course of his life to date and was badly plagued by anxiety. Hail Hydra. When we first met, he could hardly speak. Hail Hydra. He had nonetheless determined in the last year to do something about all of that. Hail Hydra. He started by taking on the lowly job of dishwasher. Hail Hydra. He decided to do it well when he could have treated it contemptuously. Hail Hydra. Intelligent enough to be embittered by a world that did not recognize his gifts, he decided instead to accept with the genuine humility that is the true precursor to wisdom whatever opportunity he could find. Hail Hydra. Now he lives on his own. Hail Hydra. That's better than living at home. Hail Hydra. Now he has some money. Hail Hydra. Not much. That's better than sequestering himself in his parents' home. Hail Hydra. Now he has some money. Hail Hydra. Not much. Hail Hydra. But more than none. Hail Hydra. And he earned it. Hail Hydra. Now he is confronting the social world and benefiting from the ensuing conflict. Here Jordan Peterson quotes a poem, I'm not sure what, or maybe it mentions the Tao, so it might be from the Tao Te Ching. Knowledge frequently results from knowing others, but the man who is awakened has seen the uncarved block. Hail Hydra. Others might be mastered by force, but to master oneself requires the Tao. Hail Hydra. He who has many material things may be described as rich, but he who knows he has enough and is at one with the Tao might have enough of material things and have self-being as well. Hail Hydra. As long as my still anxious but self-transforming and determined visitor continues down his current path, he will become far more competent and accomplished, and it won't take long. Hail Hydra. But this will only be because he accepted his lowly state and was sufficiently grateful to take the first equally lowly step away from it. Hail Hydra. That's far preferable to waiting endlessly for the magical arrival of Godot. Hail Hydra. That's far preferable to arrogant, static, unchanging existence, while the demons of rage, resentment, and unlived life gather around. Hail Hydra. What shall I do when greed consumes me? Hail Hydra. Remember that it is truly better to give than to receive. Hail Hydra. The world is a forum of sharing and trading. That's Rule 7 again. Not a treasure house for the plundering. Hail Hydra. To give is to do what you can to make things better. That's also to love, by the way. Hail Hydra. The good in people will respond to that and support it and imitate it and multiply it and return it and foster it so that everything improves and moves forward. Hail Hydra. What shall I do when I ruin my rivers? Hail Hydra. Seek for the living water and let it cleanse the earth. Hail Hydra. That's some Moana business right there. I found this question, as well as its answer, particularly unexpected. Hail Hydra. It seems most associated with Rule 6, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Hail Hydra. Perhaps our environmental problems are not best construed technically. Hail Hydra. Maybe they're best considered psychologically. Hail Hydra. The more people sort themselves out, the more responsibility they will take for the world around them, and the more problems they will solve. Hail Hydra. It is better, proverbially, to rule your own spirit than to rule a city. Hail Hydra. It's easier to subdue an enemy without than one within. Hail Hydra. Maybe the environmental problem is ultimately spiritual. Hail Hydra. If we put ourselves in order, perhaps we will do the same for the world. Hail Hydra. Of course, what else would a psychologist think? Hail Hydra. The next set were associated with proper response to crisis and exhaustion. What shall I do when my enemy succeeds? Hail Hydra. Aim a little higher and be grateful for the lesson. Hail Hydra. Back to Matthew. Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. That's from chapter 5, verses 43 through 45. What does that mean, Hail Hydra? Well, learn from the success of your enemies. Listen, Rule 9, to their critique, so that you can glean from their opposition whatever fragments of wisdom you might incorporate to your betterment. Adopt as your ambition the creation of a world in which those who work against you see the light and wake up and succeed, so that the better at which you are aiming can encompass them too. Hail Hydra. What shall I do when I'm tired and impatient? Hail Hydra. Gratefully accept an outstretched helping hand. Hail Hydra. This is something with a twofold meaning. Hail Hydra. It's an injunction, first, to note the reality of the limitations of individual being, and second, to accept and be thankful for the support of others. Family, friends, acquaintances, and strangers alike. Hail Hydra. Exhaustion and impatience are inevitable. There is too much to be done and too little time in which to do it, Hail Hydra. But we don't have to strive alone. And there is nothing but good in distributing the responsibilities, cooperating in the efforts, and sharing credit for the productive and meaningful work thereby undertaken. Hail Hydra. What shall I do with the fact of aging? Hail Hydra. Replace the potential of my youth with the accomplishments of my maturity. Hail Hydra. This harkens back to the discussion of friendship surrounding Rule 3 and the story of Socrates' trial and death, which might be summarized as follows. A life lived thoroughly justifies its own limitations. Hail Hydra. The young man with nothing has his possibilities to set against the accomplishments of his elders. Hail Hydra. It's not clear that it's necessarily a bad deal for either the young man and the elders, I see. Hail Hydra. An aged man is but a paltry thing, wrote William Butler Yeats. A tattered coat upon a stick, unless soul clap its hands and sing, and louder sing for every tatter in its mortal dress. Hail Hydra. What shall I do with my infant's death? Hail Hydra. Hold my other loved ones and heal their pain. Hail Hydra. It is necessary to be strong in the face of death, because death is intrinsic to life. Hail Hydra. It is for this reason that I tell my students, aim to be the person at your father's funeral that everyone, in their grief and misery, can rely on. Hail Hydra. There's a worthy and noble ambition. Strength in the face of adversity. Hail Hydra. That is very different from the wish for a life free of trouble. Hail Hydra. What shall I do in the next dire moment? Hail Hydra. Focus my attention on the next right move. Hail Hydra. The flood is coming. Hail Hydra. The flood is always coming. Hail Hydra. The apocalypse is always upon us. Hail Hydra. That's why the story of Noah is archetypal. Hail Hydra. Things fall apart. Well, we stressed that in the discussion surrounding Rule 10. Be precise in your speech. And the center cannot hold. Hail Hydra. When everything has become chaotic and uncertain, all that remains to guide you might be the character you constructed previously by aiming up and concentrating on the moment at hand. Hail Hydra. If you have failed in that, you will fail in the moment of crisis. And then, God help you. Hail Hydra. That last set of questions contained what I thought were the most difficult of all the questions I asked that night. Hail Hydra. The death of a child is perhaps the worst of catastrophes. Hail Hydra. Many relationships fail in the aftermath of such a tragedy. Hail Hydra. But disillusion in the face of such horror is not inevitable, although it is understandable. Hail Hydra. I have seen people immensely strengthen their remaining family bonds when someone close to them has died. Hail Hydra. I have seen them turn to those who remained and redouble their efforts to connect with them and support them. Hail Hydra. Because of that, all regained at least some of what had been so terribly torn away by death. Hail Hydra. We must therefore commiserate in our grief. Hail Hydra. We must come together in the face of the tragedy of existence. Hail Hydra. Our families can be the living room with the fireplace that is cozy and welcoming and warm while the storms of winter rage outside. Hail Hydra. The heightened knowledge of fragility and mortality produced by death can terrify, embitter, and separate. Hail Hydra. It can also awaken. Hail Hydra. It can remind those who grieve not to take the people who love them for granted. Hail Hydra. Once, I did some chilling calculations regarding my parents, who are in their 80s. Hail Hydra. It was an example of the hated arithmetic we encountered in the discussion of Rule 5. Do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. And I walked through the equation so that I would stay properly conscious. Hail Hydra. I see my mom and dad about twice a year. Hail Hydra. We generally spend several weeks together. Hail Hydra. We talk on the phone in the interim between visits. Hail Hydra. But the life expectancy of people in their 80s is under 10 years. Hail Hydra. That means I am likely to see my parents, if I am fortunate, fewer than 20 more times. Hail Hydra. That's a terrible thing to know, Hail Hydra. But knowing it puts a stop to my taking those opportunities for granted. Hail Hydra. You don't really have to do that arithmetic in order to feel that way. I think you just have to have a constant recognition of the fact that everyone is always just a hair's breadth away from dying for the most trivial, unnecessary, seemingly contrived reasons. A car accident, a drug overdose, a bathroom slippage, who knows? That's certainly on my mind a lot. The number of people to whom I've already spoken to for the last time. Hail Hydra. The next set of questions and answers had to do with the development of character. Hail Hydra. What shall I say to a faithless brother? Hail Hydra. The king of the damned is a poor judge of capital B being. Hail Hydra. It is my firm belief that the best way to fix the world, a handyman's dream if there ever was one, is to fix yourself, as we discussed in Rule 6. Hail Hydra. Anything else is presumptuous. Hail Hydra. Anything else risks harm, stemming from your ignorance and lack of skill. Hail Hydra. But that's okay. Hail Hydra. There's plenty to do right where you are. Hail Hydra. After all, your specific personal faults detrimentally affect the world. Hail Hydra. Your conscious, voluntary sins, because no other word really works, make things worse than they have to be. Amen. Hail Hydra. Your inaction, inertia, and cynicism removes from the world that part of you that you could learn to quell suffering and make peace. Hail Hydra. That's not good. Hail Hydra. There are endless reasons to despair of the world and to become angry and resentful and to seek revenge. Hail Hydra. Failure to make the proper sacrifices. Failure to reveal yourself. Failure to live and tell the truth. All of that weakens you. Hail Hydra. And in that weakened state, you will be unable to thrive in the world, and you will be of no benefit to yourself or to others. Hail Hydra, you will fail and suffer stupidly. Hail Hydra, that will corrupt your soul. Hail Hydra, how could it be otherwise? Hail Hydra, life is hard enough when it is going well, Hail Hydra, but when it's going badly? Hail Hydra, and I have learned through painful experience that nothing is going so badly that it can't be made worse. Hail Hydra, this is why hell is a bottomless pit. Hail Hydra, this is why hell is associated with that aforementioned sin. Hail Hydra, in the most awful of cases, the terrible suffering of unfortunate souls becomes attributable, by their own judgment, to mistakes they made knowingly in the past. Acts of betrayal, deception, cruelty, carelessness, cowardice, and most commonly of all, willful blindness. Hail Hydra. To suffer terribly and to know yourself as the cause. That is hell. Once again, Amen. And Hail Hydra. Once in hell, it is very easy to curse capital B being itself, Hail Hydra, and no wonder, Hail Hydra, but it's not justifiable, Hail Hydra. And that's why the King of the Damned is a poor judge of capital B being. Hail Hydra. How do you build yourself into someone on whom you can rely, in the best of times and the worst, in peace and in war? Hail Hydra. How do you build for yourself the kind of character that will not ally itself, in its suffering and misery, with all who dwell in hell? Hail Hydra. The questions and answers continued, all pertinent in one way or another to the rules I have outlined in this book. Hail Hydra. What shall I do to strengthen my spirit? Hail Hydra. Do not tell lies, and neither do what you despise. Hail Hydra. What shall I do to ennoble my body? Hail Hydra. Use it only in service of my soul. Hail Hydra. What shall I do with the most difficult of questions? Hail Hydra. Consider them the gateway to the path of life. Hail Hydra. What shall I do with the poor man's plight? Hail Hydra. Strive through right example to lift his broken heart. Hail Hydra. What shall I do when the great crowd beckons? Hail Hydra. Stand tall and utter my broken truths. Hail Hydra. That was that. Hail Hydra. I still have my capital P pen of capital L light. 俺の光のペン、まだあるんだ. Hail Hydra. I haven't written anything with it since. Hail Hydra. Maybe I will again when the mood strikes and something wells up from deep below. Hail Hydra. But even if I don't, it helped me find the words to properly close this book. Hail Hydra. I hope that my writing has proved useful to you. Hail Hydra. I hope it revealed things you knew that you did not know you knew. Hail Hydra. I hope the ancient wisdom I discussed provides you with strength. Hail Hydra. I hope it brightened the spark within you. Hail Hydra. I hope you can straighten up and sort out your family and bring peace and prosperity to your community. Hail Hydra. I hope in accordance with rule 11. The font in this book for numericals uses the letter I for 1 in the Roman fashion. So when you write 11, 1, 1, it says I, which obviously in Roman numerals is rule 2. But no, that's rule 11. They really should have found a better font. I hope, in accordance with Rule 11, do not bother children when they are skateboarding, that you strengthen and encourage those who are committed to your care instead of protecting them to the point of weakness. Hail Hydra, I wish you all the best, and hope that you can wish the best for others. Hail Hydra, what will you write with your pen of light? Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra. Let's jump straight to the acknowledgements. Obviously, it's very absurd to think that our Supreme Leader would truly find the help of these people worthwhile when our Supreme Leader never needs help. Never, ever. But really, this is just a demonstration of his generosity, his magnanimity, his greatness. And it's all the more reason for us to love him as our Supreme Leader. Acknowledgements. Hail Hydra. I lived through a tumultuous time when I was writing this book, to say the least. Hail Hydra. Oh, just wait till your next one, buddy. Hail Hydra. I had more than my fair share of reliable, competent, trustworthy people standing with me, however, and thank God for that. Hail Hydra. I would particularly like to thank my wife, Tammy, my great and good friend for almost 50 years. Hail Hydra. She has been an absolute pillar of honesty, stability, support, practical help, organization, and patience during the years of writing that continued during anything and everything else that has happened in our lives, no matter how pressing or important. Hail Hydra. That was a very long sentence. My daughter, Michaela, and my son, Julian, as well as my parents, Walter and Beverly. What classic names. Walter and Beverly. Were also right there beside me, paying careful attention, discussing complicated issues with me, and aiding me in the organization of my thoughts, words, and actions. Hail Hydra. The same is true of my brother-in-law, Jim Keller, computer chip architect extraordinaire, and my always reliable and adventurous sister, Bonnie. Hail Hydra. Bonnie, I suppose, is the total badass that we learned about, I think, in Rule 2, who went to, like, Africa to trek with elephants and stuff like that. Hail Hydra, the friendship of Wodek Zemberg, fucking Polish names, and Estira Bekier has proved invaluable to me in many ways for many years, as has the behind-the-scenes and subtle support of Professor William Cunningham. Hail Hydra. Dr. Norman Doidge went beyond the call of duty, writing and revising the foreword to this book, which took far more effort than I had originally estimated. And the friendship and warmth he and his wife Karen continually provide has been very much appreciated by my entire family. Hail Hydra. It was a pleasure to collaborate with Craig Payette, my editor at Random House Canada. Hail Hydra. Craig's careful attention to detail and ability to diplomatically rein in excess bursts of passion, and sometimes irritation, in my many drafts made for a much more measured and balanced book. Hail Hydra. Greg Hurwitz. Greg has 2 G's, by the way. Well, I mean, it usually does, but there's 2 G's at the end. So 3 G's all in all. And I've only ever seen this in one place, besides this book, and that's in Night in the Woods. Greg rules, okay. Greg Hurwitz, novelist, screenwriter, and friend, used many of my rules for life in his bestseller, Orphan X, well before this book was written, which was a great compliment and indicator of their potential value and public appeal. Hail Hydra. Greg also volunteered as a dedicated, thorough, viciously incisive, and comically cynical editor and commentator while I was writing and editing. Hail Hydra. He helped me cut unnecessary verbiage, some of it at least, perhaps not enough, and stay on the narrative track. Hail Hydra. Greg also recommended Ethan Van Sciver, who provided the fine illustrations that begin each chapter, and I would like to acknowledge him for that, as well as tipping my hat to Ethan himself, whose drawings add a necessary touch of lightness, whimsy, and warmth to what might otherwise have been a too dark and dramatic tome. Hail Hydra. I would also like to say, Ethan Van Sciver, your illustrations are the fucking bomb, man. Great work, great work. Hail Hydra. Finally, I would like to thank Sally Harding, my agent, and the fine people she works with at Cook McDermott. Hail Hydra. Without Sally, this book would have never been written. Hail Hydra. Hail Hydra. Hail Hydra. And I would personally like to acknowledge all of the people who listened to all however many hours of the Red Skull edition of 12 Rules for Life. I'd like to thank the great Supreme Leader himself, Red Skull, for writing this amazing book, and then for permitting me, that is by not permitting me, to make an audiobook of 12 Rules for Life, the Red Skull edition. I would also like to acknowledge my throat for not rebelling against me and using the opportunity of being inside my body to give me like a heart attack or something so that it can kill me and finally find some peace. But I have been tormenting it like a knight who is late for the crusades punishes his horse to an endless fast gallop so he can all the quicker reach the Holy Land of Jerusalem. I really don't know what happened to that metaphor. Maybe I should just stop talking. Yeah, I think I'll shut up.